First up today, I have got Sarah Mae Sloane, who is a fabulous set designer, stylist, photographer. She does it all. And if you haven't checked out her work, take a look at the links below. I've got all her good stuff there, as well as some resources that she shared with us. She's going to talk to us a little bit about set design, what inspires her, and tells us a little bit about how we can learn some more from her as well. But first, don't forget to like the video and subscribe so you won't miss out on any future videos coming down the pike. So let's get this going. Can't wait to introduce you to her. She's fabulous. You'll love her. I know it. Tell me a little bit about your job and what you do.
Okay. So I'm Sarah Sloane. I have worked in photography my entire adult life. I have a bachelor's degree. I have a BFA in photography. Yeah. I interned at a commercial studio. I assisted, photo assisted, production assisted, styling assisted for a long time, probably 4 or 5 years, and then moved into styling myself. And then I got into food styling. I had been a stylist for several years, and I did a lot of tabletop product, advertising stuff and room sets. And then it was a little bit before I moved to Florida, where I met Kayla, that I got really into food styling. It's just because I love food and I cook so much anyway. So it was kind of one of those things. I was really intimidated by it because, food stylists are like so, incredible. And I was just like, oh, I could never do that. I could never.
It's a low stress job, no big deal.
Yeah. So that's how I got into food styling. So I don't primarily do food styling. I mostly do kind of props, and I also do a lot of set design these days.
Yeah.
The way that I use food, and drinks too, since that's kind of in that same category, is more as a prop. So I do a lot of my own work with food, but I don't do a ton of stuff. Like I met Kayla on a Publix job, which I was doing food styling for. But a lot of my work is using food as like decoration or as like a set piece instead of a lot of the traditional like ingredient based, recipe based, I guess.
Right, like the young shots, and you're like promoting some sort of food product or moment. Yeah. Oh no, and I've loved that about your work. I think one of the first things that I saw that I think really got my attention was it's the marshmallow creatures.
Oh, yeah.
I just love like the sense of humor that you bring to your work. Okay. And I know, I feel like some of the images that I originally fell in love with have, maybe you've like curated your Instagram and sort of pulled things out, but like it's evolved a lot. And I love watching your creativity sort of evolve through all this. Cause like, I feel like you have done so much in the span of maybe even just like 3 or 4 months creatively. Like you're in a totally another spectrum now than you were 3 or 4 months ago. It's wild to watch that.
Yeah. I feel like I'm going into like a whole new spectrum too. I mean, I think it's just responding to everything that's going on, so I'm trying to set up a little home studio in this tiny little room that I'm in to kind of shoot some stuff. So we'll see where that goes.
Yeah. I saw your post on that, and that was really touching too. Sort of like not everything is so over the top and glamorous. Like sometimes you are just working on this small space, like and that really brings it home. Like you don't need, like especially if you're just starting out and you're like learning how to do things, you don't need all that equipment. And even if you had all that equipment, it'd be intimidating. You wouldn't know what to do with it and where to put everything. But so. I had some questions too, kind of related to art school, because I went to school for art as well, but it was so long ago. Like computers were a thing on campus that the professors would be like, cool, ask another student how to do that. So it was like right on the cusp. But so I'm curious to know what your art school experience was like, and like how that might have set you up for the career you have now. Like, did you envision doing what kind of in the realm of what you are doing now when you were in art school?
Not at all. No. And I will say, so I started art school in 2001, which was kind of an interesting time or 2001, 2002, something like that. I think, and that was like before we were still shooting on film. So we were still doing that whole thing. You know, people had computers obviously, but I mean, Photoshop wasn't even really.
Oh my God. No, yeah, you're right. Like it would have been like Photoshop version 3 point something.
Yeah.
I think back then
So
it was,
so for perspective, it took me a while to graduate, but I got my BFA in 2007.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we were on Photoshop CS2 at that point. So,
the luxury. You had undo.
Yeah, exactly. I learned it in school, but there was still a little bit of a debate over whether or not, you know, digital was going to be the thing. I'll be honest with you. No, I didn't even know that this existed. Like people didn't really, a lot of teachers didn't explain it to me. A lot of people didn't, it wasn't presented as an option.
Right.
And I think, and then the same way too, that I'm sure, because I know a lot of people I went to photography school with, you know, work in production or they work in a different area. Like not everyone becomes a photographer.
True. Yeah.
But a lot of times schools, and maybe that's changing now, but when I was in school, they just sort of presented it as though we were all going to be photographers and that there weren't really any other roles. So I didn't even know that this existed. And I didn't really know until probably 2005, I think, is when I did my internship at the commercial studio. And that's when I really was like, oh, this is how, you know, this whole commercial world actually works.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember being in art school and like I was focused on fine arts. So I was going to be a painter, you know, it was going to be amazing. I was going to survive off like art gallery opening food and that would be it. Like that was what my hope was. And, you know, I set the bar low. I wasn't going to make enough to buy groceries, but I'd make enough good work that I'd get into a gallery and have art openings and I could survive off that. But I do remember, and it's been a debate among a lot of BFA graduates that like we don't really get prepared for the commercial side of the art world as much as the creative and critical side. You know, we learn how to make art and we learn how to break it down and figure out what we like about it and talk about it and use language in that way, but we don't necessarily learn how to monetize our skills. And then what, like you're saying, like all the other elements that go into creating something that's commercial, it's not all just who's holding the camera, like the food stylist, the prop stylist, the set, and then the producer. There's so much that goes into it that I have to believe that I don't even think the professors are necessarily aware of, because you would think they would put that in there, right?
So, well, here's the thing. And even, so the school that I graduated from, I was a TA and I actually taught large format. They still had that in the class back then. But after I graduated and worked more as a stylist and kind of started going that route, I actually offered to do workshops and classes at the school that I graduated from. And they were like, no one needs to know about that.
What? Oh my God. But like, that kills me inside because I always had this like feeling like, no, they just weren't aware of it. Because like, if you think about theater, if you were a theater major, there are people who have to do set design, who do, you know, the costumes, hair, makeup, Like people are doing every element of that. And I feel like they're at least set up, depending, I guess, on which way they go, but they are fully aware of what goes into producing a show. Right. And as artists, what goes into producing commercial work, monetizing your skill set and all that stuff. Like we know how to put together a portfolio. We know what height to hang things on the wall, but like, you know, like the rest of it is, whatever, you figure it out, you'll get there.
Right. Well, so at photography programs, because I've majored in photography, a lot of them, not all of them, the state schools tend to be more fine art based, but photography programs in general do actually tend to skew a little more commercial. I think that they know, just as an art form in the way that it's taught, I think that it's more common for it to be, for that commercial aspect to be talked about versus probably like painting or something like that.
Right. Yeah, illustration was my major, but you know, I'm such a great illustrator now.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's kind of great. And I love how, one of the things that I really love about our industry and what we do is that you get all of these different creatives that have all these different skill sets that are so important. Like one of the assistants that I work with here in Los Angeles is a milliner. So she makes hats.
Wow.
And then there's just like such an interesting skill set, and she's trained under very famous milliners and stuff. So she has a lot of skills with working with fabrics and then creating like three-dimensional forms, and just this knowledge that, you know, I don't make hats, so I don't know the process, but it's so interesting to see like what other, because people bring a lot to the table, and it's not necessarily just from the one area that you thought of.
That's totally true.
And I love that about it. Like, I think it's so great. Which is frustrating. That's what frustrates me with art schools. Not that they aren't doing this, but the some that I've talked to in the past, and my school included, that don't, you know, give that opportunity to students to be like, hey, there's this whole host of ways to make a living doing creative things, and they're all, you know, kind of different.
And you may find your niche in there, or you might jump through a few different niches. Like, you know, you might want to try photography, but maybe you want to get behind the scenes, or maybe, you know, producing. Like, so to me, because you also produce, right? So you bring teams together.
I don't do a ton of that, and I haven't done it in years, but when I was starting out, after college, I did some production assisting. So I worked in that capacity just for a couple of years, and there were things that I like about it. And honestly, I'm really glad that I did, because even though I don't work in that anymore at all, I do have an understanding of the way that part of the job works. And so it's a little bit, I can kind of understand why things happen the way that they do better, you know, because of that insight. So I think it's great. And I loved assisting. I am like a huge advocate for assisting. That's another thing that I think that sometimes doesn't get covered enough with schools, and when people are starting out, like, and not everyone assists, and that's totally fine. I mean, it's whatever you want to do. But I learned a ton of stuff. It was a way for me to get more information in a less overwhelming way.
Exactly. Yeah, because I think a lot of people, when they're looking at food photography, especially, they feel like they have to wear all the hats, do all the work. You know, they're making the food, they're setting the props up, they're doing the set, they're taking the pictures, they're doing the post-production. And then they've got somebody who's like, oh yeah, and don't forget to do a video.
Right.
Like, no big deal. But I think it's a step that gets missed a lot. Like, I did not have that. I was baptism by fire. When you push yourself into doing it yourself, you may not realize how much help you could get if you had a team, and what resources are out there too. So definitely. I don't know, that's just me rambling on. So Instagram, social media, do you feel like that's a blessing or a curse? And if so, you know.
That's a tricky one for me. So I don't have a ton of followers. I haven't really been on Instagram for a ton of years. Like, I was kind of late, especially for most photography industry people, to come to Instagram. And then I kind of use it as a personal account when I first started, and didn't really see it as like this sort of marketing advertising platform. So that probably only started in the last maybe year and a half that I started doing it more, just work related stuff or photography related stuff. And it is a blessing and a curse. And I feel like I've met some really great people through it. So there's like a really interesting networking aspect that happens, because I feel like we all kind of follow each other, and you're like, oh, that's, you know, like there's a lot of people that I don't know personally, like yourself included, but that I've kind of like met on Instagram, because our community is kind of small compared to a lot of industries. Like we have kind of a smaller community. And so, you know, you kind of find people. I don't know how much work I get out of it, but then again, I'm not that great, and I don't do the thing where I post regularly and I think about it, and I don't have anyone that manages my social media, which, you know, maybe I should, but I don't. But it's interesting, because I do know, like, a lot of the photographers that I work with regularly, I mean, a lot of them don't even have Instagram, but then there's some people that, you know, have 50,000 followers, and they're like famous on Instagram or something. So I don't know. I don't have a good answer for it, because I haven't really decided how and why. I feel like I'm still learning how I want to work with Instagram. But it is definitely something that like, yeah, I mean, I think it's a good thing to do.
I'm in the same
One
boat.
thing that I worry about is that, you know, sometimes I get in this like posting whenever I'm posting a lot. And that's kind of why I've actually kind of taken a break a bit this year. Is like, now sometimes I feel like I get in this weird phase where I'm just making images to put on Instagram, which is like kind of becomes kind of like crazy for me.
Yeah. There's a
And
lot of pressure to keep posting, and like for us, I know I feel like I'm kind of in the same boat, and it's like I should be posting. I'm not posting. I haven't posted anything in a while. People are going to think that I'm not working anymore. I'm not available.
It's kind of a mixed bag. There's things that I really like about it. Again, like the community, and I love seeing people's work. Like, so the one thing that I really like about Instagram that doesn't have anything to do with my own Instagram necessarily is my feed. So I have my Instagram feed, my personal Instagram feed, so curated. I only see things that I want to see. So I only follow accounts that I really enjoy. So that's my favorite part, is like if I need inspiration, or if I want something, and I don't follow only photography accounts. I follow a lot of different art accounts and like only things I'm interested in. And that I really love.
So you can kind of jump down the rabbit hole and like you can pull ideas from different things. I think that's truly valuable. And for me, it's totally different from Facebook. So Facebook is like the personal stuff, like somebody's kid is looking cute. Okay, cool. Like that, you know. But that's not my Instagram. Instagram is like other artists, or all like potters and stuff, like, you know, what kind of cool things people are doing with what they're creating. Talk to me a little bit about like what makes like a really rewarding shoot for you, like a rewarding project overall.
I would say the crew. I am definitely a people person. And one of the things that I love about photography, and one of the things that I specifically love about my job, is the collaboration. At times I've thought about going back to shooting, because I don't really shoot very much at all. I pretty much only do styling. And if I shoot, it's just for myself. It's not really like client work. And people have been like, why don't you do? And I'm like, I don't want to do everything. I want to collaborate with other people.
Yeah.
I like that. And so one of my favorite things, and one of the most rewarding things, is when you work with a crew and when you work with a group of people, and it's when you get that like flow and and everyone's on the same page and you start finishing each other's sentences, and we're all, you know, like that is the most rewarding thing to me, is the people that you meet. Because one of my favorite things about this industry is the people are so amazing and interesting. So that's the most rewarding thing to me. But then, also just the imagery out of it, because I do love imagery, and I love making stuff and creative problem solving. I actually really enjoy creative problem solving. And I think that's why I like the rigging and the, you know, figuring things out. Like there's so much to problem solve in photography, because every shoot is so different.
Yeah.
Whereas graphic design is a lot different. And I actually had a tiny little stint as a graphic designer. But I don't like sitting in front of a computer by myself all day. And, you know, it's not like it's a different process every time, but you're just creating graphics. So you're not like, you don't have to figure out how do we hang a chandelier or something like that, which is the part that I like. It's like,
you're like MacGyvering all day on set. And when you're doing graphic design, it's just getting from point A to point B. And that's oversimplifying it 1,000 times. But yeah, you're absolutely right. There's a quirky challenge to every set, you know, like how do we make the light do what we want it to do? And all that.
Definitely. And that I love. And so like, there's such a reward in coming up with finding the solution.
Yeah.
So yeah, I do love that.
If you're willing to share though, like, do you have a favorite resource for like props and surfaces that, like, I know you use a lot of really alternative stuff right now. You're off in another universe lately, and it's very cool to see. But like I see photographers like you, and I'm like, where do they get all these like set pieces? Do you make a lot of it yourself? Or, you know, how much do you DIY? How much do you find? And that's like 6,000 questions in one.
Sure. No, I can get into that. I actually have a lot of thoughts on this, because I've been doing these styling classes. I'm kind of a blend. So I'm a very resourceful person, I am kind of a scavenger. I actually grew up on a farm, and so I think that I grew up very resourceful. So, and I repurpose a lot of things. Like, I like to look at things as not for what they are, but what they could be. And I think when you work in, or when you do photography for a long enough time, you start to understand what things look like, because the cool thing about photography is, like, the cool thing and the incredibly frustrating thing is when you're taking something 3-dimensional and rendering it into 2 dimensions, a lot happens. And so I think when you kind of, you know, when you do it a long time, you get a sense for what things work well when rendered 2-dimensionally. Because when I first started out, I think I was like, oh, this is really cool in person. Doesn't look great on camera, you know? And so now I think I've got this down, so it's a little bit easier for me to sort of know in advance what things are going to work well and what things aren't. But, you know, it's still sometimes I'm surprised. I'm definitely a thrifter, and I find all kinds of street treasure. I will find things on the side of the road. I find things in parks. You know, I find a lot of materials that way. So there is that. I mean, that and that's just like a who knows what you're going to find, which I also kind of love. For job, like more for testing, for jobs, it's more stressful to be like, who knows what we're gonna do? You know, that's a lot harder. But I do also, so I probably buy about half of my materials, maybe more, maybe like 60%. Los Angeles has some pretty great resources. Some things that I like to use, so I'll buy backdrops and things like that. And something that I recently learned about that didn't know about forever are the color aid sheets. Which I don't know if you've ever used those.
No.
Oh, so they're these painted, they're like, I think they're screen printed, or I think, I'm guessing they're probably screen printed, and you can get them in almost any color. And they come, I think that they're 24 by 32, so they're not huge, but they work really well for tabletop stuff. And the texture and surface of them is really, really matte and totally smooth, which is nice. So that's something that I buy. I shop at art stores a lot. Like, I tend to use a lot of papers and even matte boards sometimes for just for solid flat colored surfaces, because like they photograph pretty nicely, and they're usually pretty square. So if you're like making a horizon line, they sit pretty flat, whereas paper
that's true.
Doesn't.
So
I like to use matte boards for that. I have a ton of acrylics. They're hard to order online. I know you can get smaller ones if you get like the 12 by 12s, you can order those online, but I usually recommend that people go to like a plastics or an acrylic dealer if they're looking for acrylics. And a lot of times you can buy their ends pieces. Like if you buy in bulk, they'll give you kind of a discount, which my acrylic guy does because I spend so much money there. Because the sheets come 4 foot by 8 foot that they get.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So then they cut them down for certain projects, but there's a lot of waste left over. So there's like a lot of times the plastic or acrylic dealers will have like salvage bins. So that's a really good place to get stuff. But yeah, I mean, all over, honestly, I feel like I'm always looking. And my wife is so funny too, because she's lived with me so long. She'll be, she'll pick something up and be like, is this trash or is this a prop? Are we keeping, like.
I run into the same thing.
Yeah.
This has been on the counter for a while. I've been thinking about it. I haven't decided if it's staying or going.
Right.
Oh man. Well, we're getting close. So I want to give you a chance to talk about, what you've been teaching and where you've been teaching, so people who are interested can find you. And
oh, sure. So I'm actually trying to get that solidified a little bit, and it's in the beginning phases.
Sure.
But definitely people can find me any way they want. So they can email me. And then, which my contact info should be on my website, which is callmesarah.com. And then, but you can also send me a message through Instagram. That's kind of where I've been posting the class times. But so classes are held once a week right now. And then they're actually starting to be twice a week, because I'll do either Monday or Tuesday will be the new class for the week. And then either Thursday or Friday is when I do another one of the class from the previous week. So if anyone misses that one, they can do another one. I do a lot of tabletop classes, styling classes, and I do talk about what materials I use, where I get those materials, what kind of things are in my kit. And then also some theory stuff, because so just because it's not don't want it all to be super boring. I have some fun things about like theories and you know, techniques in art, more exciting stuff that's like, you know, do whatever you want, inspire.
Yeah.
So
Well, I feel like you're a good advocate for like breaking the rules and creating successful projects, and like you've got like a lot of whimsy and edge and snap to your work that's like just really fun to watch and see. It's always been a pleasure to see your work pop up in my feed and, you know, get a feel for what you're experimenting with. So, but just real quick, so the live classes are on Instagram.
Well, I actually do them on Zoom. I've just been promoting them on Instagram.
Oh, okay.
But the live classes I do through a Zoom, and so I create a whole thing. I do a screen share, so I've got a whole presentation. It goes through much like you would in a real classroom.
Yeah.
And the reason I like to do them live is so that people can stop and ask questions and things like that. Yeah. So there will be some recorded ones, I think, probably in the future, but I prefer the live. So right now we're just doing live.
Cool. All right. So they can find you there. And this was awesome. If we get a chance to do it again, I'd love to have you again at some point. Because I got so many more questions and we only got through some of them.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it was really great talking with you and nice to meet you in person.
Yeah, you too. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Subscribe, like the video. I just want to make sure you guys don't miss out on any fabulous interviews.